Hello, Olgata, and welcome now to the South Pacific Central Bank's Virtual Governors Forum for 2021. First of all, of course, my name is Yuril Matanani from CBSI. Happy and honored to be the MC for this program. Just before we get into the formalities of the program, some quick housekeeping matters for us as always. When we join this platform, just make sure to keep our mics on mute. And also for the others that are joining us online to disable your videos throughout the session. Chat box is there. You can also make your comments as we go through this forum session. In terms of timing of speakers, we'll try to keep it within the allocated segments within this forum. And then after this, we should complete our program on time. We have 5 different segments for the forum. After this, we'll have the welcome and forum overview, followed by the opening remarks, the keynote address, and then of course the panel discussions. And then we should have the closing remarks to wrap up our forum for this morning. Again, thank you for this opportunity to have this forum to be convened again. And I'd like to now call upon Dr. Pamindra Sharma, the program convener for the South Pacific Central Bank's program, to commence with the welcome and forum overview. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Rio. Governors, colleagues, very good morning. Bula Vinaka and greetings from Brisbane, where, as you might know, we are currently in a 3-day lockdown, which hopefully will end on Friday at 6 p.m. Indeed, the times we live in. There will be a few welcomes today from Honiara, from us here in Brisbane and Manila. The idea is to make sure that we all feel really welcomed. Let me begin by contextualizing today's event. The response to last year's survey question, would you like this type of forum to become a regular regional event, was an overwhelming yes. Respondents included all 5 central banks and stakeholders, RBA, RBNZ, IDB, World Bank, IMF, Griffith, and others. So here we are then, endeavoring to make this an annual event. So thank you very much for your time and questions that you have sent us for the panel, for the governors. And of course, governors, your very strong and continuing support is greatly appreciated. Thank you also to ADB for joint convenership of this event, 2nd year in a row now. Today, we are hoping to get responses to your questions from the governors on how things have been in the region with COVID-19, 18 months on. It is indeed a rare opportunity to get an audience with 5 central bank governors in one forum, especially during the current more than usual busy times for the governors. I'm sure we all are going to find it worth our time. Once again, thank you and welcome to the forum.
Thank you once again, Dr. Pamindra Sharma, for the welcome and forum overview. We will move on to now the formal part, which is the opening remarks. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the Dean for the Griffith Business School, Professor Fabrizio Camagnani, to deliver the opening remarks for us. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all virtually meeting today, and pay my respect to the elders past and present, and extend respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I really would like to acknowledge the presence of Leah Guterres, Director General, Pacific Department, Asian Development Bank in Manila, governors, deputy governors, senior management and colleagues of the central banks of Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, and Timor-Leste. Also, I would like to acknowledge colleagues from the Reserve Bank of Australia, Reserve Bank of New Zealand, World Bank Group, Asian Development Bank, International Monetary Fund, Australia Pacific Business Council, Austrade, DFAT, MFAT, and fellow academics. Again, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your time today. On behalf of the Griffith Business School, it is my real pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to each one of you. This is the 2nd Virtual Governors Forum, and today's sessions considers the question of how central banks in the South Pacific, and indeed everywhere else around the world, are coping with the disastrous and far-reaching socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19, a year after we started to deal with this pandemic. This very well follows the theme of last year's inaugural forum, which considered the opportunities and challenges presented by the unexpected and unprecedented pandemic for the central banks. Now, this question is, of course, central to the policy debate. For one thing, the economic costs and also the social and human costs of COVID require governments and international institutions to support the economy and the community through large fiscal rescue packages. For another, the inevitable accumulation of deficit and debt that follows from the implementation of these fiscal rescue packages calls for enhanced coordination of fiscal and monetary policy in order to guarantee the long-term sustainability of fiscal and monetary equilibrium. Consideration of these problems is also likely to spur a new wave of applied research on monetary policy. And I expect, as an economist, that the policy debate and the new advances in applied research will lead to the emergence of a new, exciting perspective on the conduct of macroeconomic policy. I would like to explicitly acknowledge the time and commitment of the governors of the central banks represented here today. I'm fully aware of your very busy schedules, governors, especially during current times when the demand on your times is extraordinary. So I'm really grateful that you accepted our invitation and you are able to be here today. Thank you. Of course, the strong developing partnership with the ADB, our co-conveners of this now annual event, is equally acknowledged and appreciated. I've been informed that ADB will sponsor the next in-person regional conference for central banks. I've also been informed that ADB is an industry partner in a grant application being developed by Griffith. We truly value the evolving partnership. Let me turn for a moment to the bigger picture. The partnership between Griffith and the South Pacific central banks continues to grow stronger by the day. It is in fact a unique partnership as we don't see many around the world. In fact, I'm personally not aware of any similar partnership, particularly one that is geared towards developing capacity for research and policy making at central banks. We as Griffith are very grateful to the region central banks for this exceptional opportunity. The collaborations that we have established over the last few years have to date delivered a number of joint working papers, journal publications, research income, conferences and seminars, and training opportunity. We also have a memorandum of understanding for PhD, co-funded by Griffith and the central banks. We look forward to its commencement soon. I'm sure that the next phase of the capacity development program, which commenced with the signing of the regional MOU last year, will be even more exciting. I'm told that for the panel session today, the questions have been obtained from colleagues of the 5 central banks, including senior managers, as well as key stakeholders of the program, whose representatives are present here at the forum today. I'm sure that this session will be as informative and enriching as it was last year. It will be indeed a great opportunity to hear from the governors on a wide range of issues, from macroeconomics to issues relating to the private and financial sectors, and of course, a glimpse of what lies ahead. In conclusion, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge my colleagues in the Griffith Business School, and Dr. Parmendra Sharma in particular. Parmendra has led this initiative from day one, and he has to be congratulated for his leadership and vision. Parmendra, it is a real pleasure for me as a colleague of yours to see the growing success of this project. Well done, really, on behalf of the whole of the GBS, Griffith Business School community. With those words, may I once again thank each one of you for your time today and wish you a successful event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Fabrizio, for the opening remarks for us in this forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move on to the keynote address, which will be delivered by the Director General for the Pacific Department at Asian Development Bank. It is my pleasure to welcome now Ms. Leah Guterres to deliver the keynote address for us this morning. Over to you, Ms. Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matanani. Excuse me. Distinguished central bank governors and guests, Good morning and welcome to the 2021 South Pacific Central Bank Virtual Governors Forum. I'm very pleased to join you today to discuss how central banks are managing the impacts of the coronavirus disease. It has been a challenging year globally, and the Pacific Island countries have faced particular challenges that reflect their unique attributes. I wish to commend the Pacific Island governments and central banks for quickly and effectively responding to the impacts of COVID-19. The pandemic has brought the most severe economic shock faced by the Pacific, with an estimated contraction in GDP across the region of nearly 6% in 2020. Tourism and trade, two mainstays of Pacific economies, have been particularly hit hard. The near to medium term economic outlook remains challenging. In April, ADB's Asian Development Outlook 2021 pointed to some optimism for economic recovery as vaccine rollouts are underway. However, this optimism has since been tempered by recent outbreaks in Fiji, the Pacific's second largest economy, and Australia, a main trading and tourism partner for most countries in the region. This will likely hold back the expected recovery in 2021. Pacific Island countries responded to COVID-19 with packages totaling $2.6 billion in 2020, and this includes assistance to businesses, those who have lost jobs, and strengthening health systems readiness. Many of these programs have been extended into 2021. ADB, on our part, we committed $1.2 billion to support government response packages in the region in 2020, up 150% from 2019. 58% of that funding focused on COVID-19 response, with $378 million provided in budget support through what we call the COVID-19 Pandemic Response Option Program, or CIPRO. And this were to 8 developing member countries, which are the Cook Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of Marshall Islands, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu. Central banks have also reacted swiftly and effectively, providing significant stimulus. Policy interest rates were reduced to encourage financial institutions to lower their lending rates. Bank capital adequacy ratios have been relaxed to allow for increased liquidity. Other policy requirements have also been eased to give effect to loan repayment holidays and other programs. And special financing and guarantee facilities have been established or reactivated to provide additional support to businesses. These actions, designed to maintain financial stability, have been well received and were generally effective. We look forward to hearing more from our central bank governors for country-specific updates. The pandemic has brought both risks and opportunities for assistance for central banks. As the economic fallout from COVID-19 is affecting virtually every segment of banks' credit portfolios, the impact on bank balance sheets is likely to be considerable. Central bank actions to relax regulatory requirements have allowed businesses to continue operations and retain workers. As economies start recovering, and when stimulus and assistance packages are scaled back, further measures may be required to manage any potential risks to financial stability. Globally, improved access to high-speed internet and data availability is driving significant innovation. At the same time, the need for social distancing has increased the attractiveness of many technologies and prompted a considerable increase in digitization. In the Pacific, connectivity is increasing as additional undersea cables are established. Technology is likely to improve the ability of central banks to monitor the finance sector more effectively, maintain financial stability, and the emergence of central bank digital currencies is an interesting and complex issue that is worthwhile understanding and keeping an eye on. On the other hand, innovation may also create risks for consumer protection and market integrity. Therefore, when and how to extend regulatory frameworks to cover new financial products and innovations will be a key consideration in years to come. Another issue facing central banks and Pacific financial systems are the causes and impacts of bank de-risking. The Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, considers de-risking an unintended consequence of tighter global regulation. Globally, a tightening of regulations surrounding anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism, or AML-CFT, have led to the withdrawal of international bank correspondent banking relationships, which threatens Pacific Island countries' ability to transact internationally. We recognize the efforts that have already been made and are underway by Pacific Island governments, central banks, and others to tackle these issues. ADB and a broad range of development partners have put their heads together to consider ways to assist. At this point in time, ADB is facilitating a pilot Know Your Customer or KYC project for the Central Bank of Samoa to standardize customer due diligence processes of Samoan banks and money transfer operations, with the intention to facilitate trade by Samoan businesses and reduce the cost of remittances to families. This also addresses one of the causes of de-risking. Regional cooperation will also help address such challenges. Ensuring this pilot's success will require significant efforts from the central bank to obtain the support of and coordinate with multiple government agencies in the country. Maintaining and improving the business enabling environment and MSME finance are critical for economic stability and assisting COVID-19 recovery. ADB has supported Pacific Island countries and has supported Pacific Island countries in these areas for many years and will continue to do so, supplementing and supporting the efforts of Pacific governments. ADB's upcoming Pacific approach for 2021 to 2025 includes a core focus on supporting inclusive growth. In addition, we have recently approved a $3 million technical assistance program focused on the recovery of MSMEs from the effects of COVID-19 in 6 Pacific countries. At present, we are also preparing a $30 million project in Papua New Guinea focused on improving financial access and entrepreneurship development. We expect to bring this to our board of directors for their consideration this year. The Technical Assistance Pacific Private Sector Development Initiative, or PSDI, is now in its 4th phase and will continue until 2024. Many of you are very familiar with PSDI. In the area of finance, PSDI is focused on increasing the availability of finance to MSMEs through a series of linked activities. For example, PSDI has supported collateral reforms across the Pacific and is extending that work into agriculture supply chain finance in Fiji and PNG. PSDI also provides support to state-owned banks in introducing new products to support MSMEs and pension funds to increase their ability to lend through finance subsidiaries and on ensuring that the legal and regulatory underpinnings for the finance sector are appropriate for our ever-changing world. We look forward to continuing to work with you through this progress. Before concluding, I would like to acknowledge again the work that Pacific Island governments and central banks have done to respond to COVID-19 quickly and effectively. I also want to highlight a few key messages for our path forward. First, a balance must be struck between short to medium term stimulus and longer term asset quality and financial stability issues. Second, recent improvements in connectivity and technology will benefit central banks and economies more broadly. This will require central banks to understand relevant technological advances early and ensure that such innovations, legal and regulatory underpinnings are robust. Finally, international bank de-risking is a challenge for Pacific Island governments, central banks, financial systems, and development partners alike. We need to work together to find solutions to tackle both the root causes of de-risking and its impacts. While the road to recovery may be long, we see positive indicators in many Pacific countries, particularly now that vaccination efforts ramp up. ADB remains committed to supporting the Pacific region. I wish you all the very best and look forward to hearing from all of you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, the Director General for the Pacific Department at ADB, Ms. Leah Gutierrez, for the delivery of the keynote address. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will now move on to the panel discussions with our distinguished panelists. And this will be moderated now by Mr. Yong Ha, the Chief Economist and Head of Economics at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Yong Ha to continue with the panel discussions. Thank you.
Thank you for that welcome. Bula vinaka and tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Yong Ha from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, Te Pūtea Mātua, beaming in from Wellington. So you'll see this grey background behind me. If you look out the window, if I gave you a window shot, it would be pretty much the same colour. It's positively freezing, and this is one of the downsides of virtual forums, is the inability to be sitting somewhere in the warm South Pacific having this forum instead. But hopefully one day we'll be able to do that. It is my honour to be moderating this panel session, and I have some distinguished guests with me. A very quick introduction of them for the audience. I have Governor Ali from the Reserve Bank of Fiji. Welcome, kia ora. Governor Athi from the Reserve Bank of Vanuatu. Kia ora, Governor. Governor Bakani from the Reserve Bank of Papua New Guinea. Kia ora, Governor. Governor Farao from the Central Bank of the Solomon Islands. Kia ora, Governor. And Deputy Governor Alves Maria from the Central Bank of Timor-Leste. Kia ora. Welcome to you all. And as mentioned, these questions have been sent in from participants, and the run sheet will be, there are 6 questions. I'll ask the question, and then I'll ask each of the governors to provide their response to those questions in order that I just introduced them in. They have 2 minutes each, and without further ado, why don't we ask the first question? So the first question to you, Governor Ali, is following the sharp contraction in 2020, there are some signs of a tentative recovery, though it's still uneven across different countries in the region. How has your bank's assessment of the most prominent risks and vulnerabilities around the near-term outlook changed in the past 6 months?
Thank you for that question. So, our risk and vulnerabilities has been elevated, particularly in the last 2 months. We had initially expected the economy to contract by about 22% last year. The end result is almost close to 16%, and we'll be releasing the numbers later this week. For this year, we had projected a small growth. And as you all know, that the economies, there are 2 types of economies. One that is tourism dependent, the other is the commodity exporting countries. The tourism dependent countries have contracted by a much larger percentage than the average of around 6% that we see in the region. And Fiji had recorded or would record the largest contraction last year. For this year, we had expected a small growth on the expectation that borders may open somewhere around the middle of this year or late this year. With the second wave starting a few months ago, we now expect the economy to contract again this year. And right now, our estimate is somewhere close to 5% as of right now. So the economy will contract contrary to our earlier expectation of a small growth this year. What this has resulted in unemployment spiking further, and our internal estimate is somewhere around 16% from a low of 5% a few years back. Poverty is also increased because a lot of people are really out of job or on reduced hours. So the outlook for this year, unfortunately, is not that positive. However, I think it's important to highlight that with the support of Australian and New Zealand government, we've promised about 1.5 billion doses of vaccines. We've got about 50% of our population who are having the first dose as of today, and just below 10% who have been fully vaccinated. We're hoping that we will get close to 80% people vaccinated by first dose by at the latest August and 2 doses by October. So hopefully in the next 4 months, if we are able to ramp up our vaccination, then we could start opening up borders in the last quarter of this year, and hopefully in 2022 is much better than this year. Thank you.
Thank you to Governor Ali. Governor Ati, your response, please.
I thank organizers for this very important forum. I'm not sure whether I can cover all this in 2 minutes, but I'll try my best. We were forecasting around 4% growth this year. Last year, there was a slump of about 2.6 or so percent. We are going to refute that forecast this afternoon, and I'm pretty sure that there will be further contraction for this year. Those forecasts were based basically on the reopening of the international borders and the implementation of big projects. Those things have not happened. The implementation of the projects have happened to some extent, but we believe that that will not impact as expected on the growth forecast. So it's very interesting to see this because the rollout of the vaccination in Toronto just started up thing last month, and it's continuing well. It will take time. But let me just say something about the outlook for inflation for the year. Remember last year there was a surge in prices in the second quarter of the year last year, about 5.6%, and that is certainly due to 2 particular disasters: the COVID, of course, and the cyclone Aral. Now, those figures have now receded to between 3 and 4%, and we're pretty sure it's continuing, but the risk remains high. On the effect of COVID on other economic variables like the current account balance, as you will note from 2017, we've been recording a positive current account balance, and it's due to the labor mobility, tourism, and the citizenship program. But now with the tourism being down, it's turned negative. So it's a big concern for us here in the bank, but we're still running at about 12 months of import cover in our reserve. So I think that's pretty healthy at the moment. Otherwise, in the months ahead, I think we're going to see a further contraction or forecast for a contraction. further contraction this year. It's very, very uncertain for many of us, I must say.
Thank you, Governor. I can appreciate the uncertainty where everyone's facing their own version of it, but it certainly remains an uncertain world that we're staring into. Governor Bakani, can I have your comments, please?
Okay, thank you. Just like the others, we went through that same experience last year, more severely into after March, when the pandemic impact was quite strong. We reacted quickly to put in place some support measures, but in overall, the impact of those support measures, both from the fiscal point of view in terms of government support, did not really, have a strong impact on businesses, on the lives of people that were targeted, who were impacted by the pandemic. Instead, politicians, of course, use the money to divert them to their electorates, supporting, completely different areas that did not have a direct impact. On the monetary policy side, that also had, we eased a lot of our rates and to try and stimulate lending to the private sector, who were mostly affected, but that did not have an impact also, because people had other ways of keeping themselves, afloat during those times. So most of the cash, the liquidity that was given to the banks, in fact, went back to finance government through purchase of, new issues of debt by government. So overall, the impact of last year and even so this year has not really been strong in terms of the support arrangements that were put in place. Now, the issue is still there, in that some businesses are slowing down, closing houses, and unemployment is increasing. In terms of those, there's a lot of people been laid off. New measures been put in place in terms of people working from home, working on shifts. So those things are some of the measures taken by both private and public sector, mainly in the private sector. Public sector, in terms of government, continue to work, continue to get paid. And, of course, not mentioning productivity, which is, always dismal in this kind of situations. And of course, what happened last year, government looked for more money. So they amended the Central Banking Act to increase the temporary advance, which is a very easy way out. So there's some issues we had with between fiscal and the independence of the bank in that respect. But and that led to a current plan now to review the bank after 21 years of the existing legislation, which is back in 2000. So those are kind of things that the current government is having on in terms of interfering with the bank, but we remain vigilant and strong in terms of directing back on government to do the right things. Now, coming back to the economy, look, this year is still the same. It's probably there's some of the recovery we see at the beginning of this year, but then suddenly the second waves of the pandemic started again. So things began, some lockdowns, the international flights been reduced, and tourism sector being affected. There were some opportunities for local tourism to really pick up during that time last year and this year, but that did not was not encouraged. So again, underlying all this, the economic situation is still low. We're expecting some growth this year, but I think, again, ADB and the World Bank and even the IMF, during our discussions, we say, I think things are still pointing to some a small recovery, but not that much that we expected earlier this year. So things are not that good at this stage. Conventional, policies or monetary policy in the respect does not work. So we are probably thinking outside the box to see whether, unconventional measures can be directed. And again, it really comes down to fiscal. In this situation, it's not much of monetary policy can help, but it's fiscal area can do a lot of things to try and stimulate the economy and get the economy back again to recovery. There's a lot of focus on SMEs, MSMEs, as to stimulate the economy, but again, nothing, no real measures like tax concessions or those kind of subsidies or those kind of things those are things that probably government can think of in this situation to really have an impact on the people that we are targeting to remain strong and, to continue to sustain the economy over this period. So that's all I can say at this stage. Again, the government continue to, still get the support from international donors. And that's as a result, debt continues to increase. But the emphasis is more on concessional loans rather than commercial ones. So I think that's a change that is taking place at this stage.
Thank you, Governor Makani. Governor Farrell, could I have your reflections, please? Oh, you're still on mute, sorry.
My apologies. 12 months down the line, and in fact, in the last 6 months, I suppose that uncertainties on the near-term outlook still remains. And although at least there is hope on the horizon, all because of the rollout of the vaccine. However, the rollout in terms of the pace is much slower than expected, and that in itself is a risk. But overall, the risk in the near-term outlook are still there. And as long as the economic fundamentals are not addressed, this risk will remain. But with the new normal brought about by this pandemic, I think it has also increased, or the new risks have also emerged. Like, for example, this pandemic has caused travel restrictions. And one of the reasons that we are now, like what we are doing now, we cannot meet in person, but meet online. But then it also comes with the risk of cybersecurity. But in terms of the economy, last year, the containment measures imposed by the government really had a hit on the economy. On the negative side, it has an impact on the economy, which contracted by 5.3%. On the positive side, I think it has deterred the spread of the virus to the community. And I'm pleased to say that right now, we don't have any COVID at the moment. But there are signs that since the beginning of this Q1 for this year, there are signs of recovery that has been shown in terms of the economy. The inflation remained low. In fact, as of the first quarter, it was still around in the negative zone, but it is projected to be around 3% by end of this year. But growth for this year, it is projected to be around 1.5%, still very small. And in terms of the government finances, there is a deficit projected to be around 3% of GDP. With that, I think the fundamentals are the main things that the government that really needs to be addressed. And as mentioned by Governor Loy, I think from the monetary policy perspective, at this point of time, it is very difficult for the monetary policy transmission mechanism to efficient or effectively work. It is the fiscal policy that we will also be able to work hand in hand with the monetary policy, so we can be able to address the risks that are ahead of us. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Farrell. Deputy Governor Alves Maria, could I have your comments, please?
Thank you. Just a question before. Should we comment a long way to the question 6 or just the first question?
Just the first question for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's been a privilege to me with all the governors, South Pacifics and the lakes here. Let me just, in the interest of time, let me just go straight in terms of the national economy. Timor-Leste recorded a recession in 2020. The central bank estimated the non-oil GDP diminished by -3% due to two things in 2020. It's elongation of the political uncertainty in 2020 and late approval of the budget for 2020, and also the adverse impact of the pandemic and respective lockdown and social interactions restrictions contribute to this recession. But also, even in 2020, the country experienced the first flood in March 2020, and it's worsened by the recent Seroja cyclone in April 2021. So domestic inflation, but despite of this, the domestic inflationary pressure have remained controlled and low through 2020, 2019 and 2020, with the annual inflation rates remain close to 1%, meaning not even achieve 1%. So Timor-Leste continues to report a current account deficit. The gradual and continued reduction in the deficit in the goods and services, commercial accounts, has resulted in the contraction of the Timor-Leste's effective external deficits. In terms of the outlook, in the even short to medium term, the national economic outlook is subject to a larger than usual range of the uncertainty and risk still to the downside. So we are still facing the risk of the downside. Although government has already put the economic recovery plan under the special commission, government provided aggregate families financial support and basic food supports, plus the humanitarian support for those that affected by the floods, but the risk of the downside still remains, and hard work still needed. But government target 80% by vaccinating more than 80% or at least 80% of the population will keep the economy back to at least not normally it's close to the norm. Thank you.
Thank you. So sort of what I'm hearing is a common theme around the recovery or the return to economic activity has probably disappointed some of the early expectations, partly around the borders still remaining closed, or in some cases the virus transmission. So it's fallen short of some of your expectations. The ongoing challenges around the effectiveness of monetary policy and perhaps the increasing role or effectiveness of fiscal policy is sort of a high level summary of across all those responses. Just in the interest of time, I might just move on to question 3. And this is sort of talking about the banking and financial sector. And then if we have more time, we can come back to that specific question number 2 around fiscal monetary policy. But I think we've had a flavour of that already. So the question I'll put to to your or the panelists again is, you know, the weakness in activity is putting pressure on your own respective financial system. So what's your assessment of the risks and the outlook for the banking sector? Governor Ali, can I have your comments, please?
Thank you. So we all understand there's a very strong link between how the economy performs and the health of the financial system. You know, there's enough studies all over the world. In the case of Fiji, our non-performing loans was somewhere around 2%, say 24 months or 36 months ago. It has now climbed to 6.7% as of last May. So non-performing loans have gone up. I think the benefit for Fiji is 5 out of our 6 commercial banks are foreign owned. They're well capitalized. In fact, they had much higher capital when we entered into this crisis. So they're well capitalized. So really, despite the challenges and despite the thing, we have been able to manage it. We continue to work very closely with them and we've done a number of stress testing. We think at this point in time, if our economy recovers next year, there will be no need for capital injection. However, you know, most of the parents have said if there's a need for capital injection, they will continue to put it. I think one other thing is that we've worked very closely with the banks, given that the economy contracted so much, in terms of making sure that they do not go quickly and mortgage properties or things like that. So most of them have held on to things, giving moratoriums to businesses over the next, you know, we had all agreed to extend it until September, take into account, you know, the IFRS standards, making sure that they think. So we continue to talk to them. You know, if the economy recovers next year, then I really feel that, you know, we'll bounce back. But if something happens to the economy, then I think we're going to do really uncharted waters and uncharted. But for now, I think that despite the fact that we've got NPLs rising, you know, the banks remain strong. The Fiji National Provident remains strong. So I think it's still manageable. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Athi, your comments, please.
Yes, thank you very much. We see 3 main risks: credit risk, cyber risk, de-risking by correspondent banks. I think, with the correspondent banks, I think this is something that we're all struggling with in the Pacific. I'm glad that you're facilitating this forum. Today is the last day for one of our commercial banks, 1 or 2 of our commercial banks, relationship with their US dollar account with the correspondent bank. Today is the last day. So we're still trying to help Ministry of Finance as well. But this is an issue that is affecting most of our smaller countries, and I really wish to urge others to perhaps look into this very, very closely, especially ADB, IMF, and the World Bank. I think we cannot struggle alone with this. The second issue that I want to, the second risk is in the credit risk. You know, most of our economies are very dependent on tourism. And with this COVID, the banks are recording notable increase in their non-performing loans. And so we've been trying to help them by suspending the loan terms, especially as well on the temporary suspension of the potential requirements, trying to help them to recover from this. By today, I think we will, after no choice, we will have to extend those moratorium again, perhaps for another 3 months or so. On the other risk that we see, cyber risk is also emerging because of the increased digitalization of most of the banking operations. Whilst we are in agreement in principle on this particular trend, we also have to be very mindful of the fact that we need to be looking as well on how to regulate them on issues like what do you call them? What do you call those? Cryptocurrency and whatever technology. So I think it's very important that once we are all looking into this direction, it's very important that we do have in place frameworks in place to be able to supervise them properly. They can become our risks in the future. So we see those three areas of risk in this particular question: credit risk, cyber risk, and the risking by commercial banks, correspondent banks, rather. Correspondent banking, sorry. Thanks.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Bakani. Oh, I think you're still on mute.
There we go. I'm sorry. As I following on from my earlier story about the liquidity in the banking system, loan lending, and financial sector, continue to funding government budget deficit. Then that made a lot of banks, very profitable last year. They, particularly BSP, although declined to some extent in the areas of the foreign exchange side, and lending, but mostly in terms of investments. That's where they getting a lot of their revenue and profitability from. Likewise, the super funds were affected also. We have the biggest public sector superannuation fund, paying a very low, historically low rate of return to the dividend to their membership. Again, most of their investments were affected last year, especially investments overseas, investment in properties, because there's a lot of vacancies, low occupancy rates in some of their apartments and all that. So that affected their profitability last year. Now, the risk going forward is that you continue to have, the banks are not really, doing the underlying what they call role as a banker. Of course, they ventured into. There was opportunity for digital, services to be introduced, and most of them did, in terms of introducing some new products using digital technology. But overall, in terms of the services, the level of service they provide to customers was, what they call lowered, or not like before. So, and another factor that came into being was that because of the risk in possible money laundering, both within the Papua New Guinea economy and also through use of digital technology. And we have a step up in this area by the what they call it, the FASU, which is the equivalent of FIU. So there is then, and evidently, it's evident that there is a clash between the area of money laundering and the area of our normal banking supervision. This is something we're finding, and we're trying to resolve this issue, because both operate two different legislations. The money laundering is telling people, people are asking a lot of questions relating to anti-money laundering or money laundering. And then people are reluctant now to go and do banking, use banking services. So they are holding cash. And that clashes with our financial inclusion, clashes with our overall, supervisory role or regulatory role as a central bank. So this is something we are we're contending with. We're trying to find ways of how we can resolve this. And there are two independent legislations operating independently, but for somehow we have to resolve the conflict going forward. So this and it has potential for, again, as you probably have seen, it came out in the Australian Financial Review that our biggest bank was involved in non-compliance of some money laundering, and it came out in the Australian newspaper. So, and already the questions about what the Governor Ati is saying in the areas of banking relationship or with corresponding banking relationship has been questioned. So this is something that I think during the course of our work, we'll have to try and understand how these two can work hand in hand rather than clashing with each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Farrell, your reflections, please.
Thank you. So with the continued subdued business activities, which coupled with the slow rollout in terms of the vaccine and the continued restrictions on international borders, this has caused some buildup in corporate debts, which also affected their repayment ability. And further to that as well, some of these corporate bodies, they are major service providers to the government. Now, with the government facing cash flow problems, they are not able to pay their service providers, and most of the service providers, they have loans with the banks, and this has caused more defaults in their loans. So in terms of the NPLs, it has increased to around 10% at the moment. So that's one of the risks that we see that it has to be mitigated. The other risk that we also see is the risk emanating from the fintech development. While the fintech evolution has a lot of great financial innovation opportunities, at the same time, it also disrupts the financial landscape, and that it also comes with risks to both the financial institutions and the customers, and as well as to the overall financial stability. So some of these risks, they are well known, like the customer protection, data, cybersecurity, and all that. So these are the major risks that we see here. There are a couple of risks that are also, from us, we are also looking at it in addressing some of these, like the culture and the conduct risk, in terms of to ensure that there is risk culture in the financial institutions, mainly with the non-bank financial institutions, that they seem not to have this risk culture embedded in their corporate plans. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Deputy Governor Alves Maria, your comments, please.
Thank you very much. Well, in Timor-Leste's case, the financial system continues to be highly dynamic, and in terms of the growth of its activities, assets and deposits, although the pandemic impact is going on. Government back in 2020 initiated a credit moratorium program where government cover 60% of the interest. And this program continued this year with about totaling about 7 million, but last year the implementation was perhaps the participants, the applicants only reached about 1 million. And this year government put another 2 million to cover the credit moratorium program with the share of the interest payment 60-40 for the governments. And the banking system remains stable and solid. For example, the non-performing loans level at 2020 remains low at the level of 2%, while the total provisions over the NPLs ratio was about 102.7%. So in Timor-Leste's case, the economic activities is slowing down. Many businesses are closing, but in terms of banking sectors remain stable and solid with the low performing low level of the non-performing loans, perhaps because of the government providing a credit moratorium, two credit moratorium program consecutively in 2020 and 2021. I think that's all. In terms, just a quick addition in terms of the even in the financial sector, in the entire financial sector, the access to finance and financial inclusions rate is increasing. We just recently released a financial inclusion report for 2020, and it posed a notable increase in terms of the financial access and financial inclusion to rural areas, not only to facilitate during the pandemic process, but increase financial accesses and financial access points and financial transactions efficiency, particularly unbanked in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So there's one more question in this section, but some of you have already touched on it in your remarks already. So I will ask the question, and so the specific question is, how do you see the risks and opportunities arising from increased digitization? And then what are the roles of regulators to both address the risks and facilitate this digital transformation? We've got 5 minutes left for this section, but I'll come back to each of the governors. If you feel you've got something additional to add over and above the comments you've made so far, feel free. But if you feel you've said your piece, then more than happy to pass on to the next speaker. So Governor Ali, do you have any additional comments on sort of the challenges that regulators face in this space?
Very quickly, I think that the transition to digitalization, both the financial sector and the real sector, has been fast-tracked in the last 12 months or so. It's pleasing to note that despite the fact that we all talk about cybersecurity, financial institutions, and I think it's common in the region, is that this is one thing that we saw, that with this pandemic, the BCPs were very robust, so they continue to operate. Most financial institutions have online payment system and so forth. And in the case of Fiji, I just thought to highlight that government has made them out substantial payments to those who are unemployed. They recently paid out almost $250,000 to people, payments to 250,000 payments, sorry. And this is all done through telcos. So, so telecommunications or telecom mobile companies are now in this space also, payment system. So we continue to use them as well as the traditional banking system. And I'll leave it there and let the others, add on.
Thank you. Governor Athi, do you have any other additional comments you'd like to make?
Yes, just quickly on the fourth question, I believe we all share the same feeling here, but digitalization is in the financial sector has always been a way forward, and several banks, including ourselves, have been encouraging the same ever since, simply because of its ability to improve efficiency and productivity across level of banks operation. The pandemic has surely accelerated this evolution of digitalization of the financial services, and we have seen a rise in the number of interested online money transfers and payment system operators. This is welcoming development for us. But we also see most interest in blockchain, like I said before, and other areas. And we need to make sure that we have proper regulation in place before we come into this area. So as regulators, I think we need to carefully facilitate these chains, and there's a great need for us to closely collaborate on it with especially with other non-bank regulators and stakeholders. Can I just quickly go back to question 2 that I think I haven't said anything on it. I think Vanuatu came into this pandemic. We have 2 disasters, by the way. We have the cyclone and the pandemic. We came in with a strong economic fundamentals in place. We have low inflation. We have growth at 3 to 4%. We have the sound banking sector. We have reserves at 12 months of import. And that is very important. I think that was the reason why it took us time, or I mean, we were able to fend off, if you like, a lot of these disasters. But I must say too that we continue to maintain the same monetary policy stance since last year until now. So just like my other colleagues, I really want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Bacani, any additional comments you would like to make?
Yeah, just a few. I think the opportunity arose more faster last year during the pandemic in terms of the financial system or sector adopting new technology to reach or to provide a faster and efficient way to deal with the customers in terms of providing the banking services to the customers. One thing that stands out and is in terms of enhancing this area is the identity. That's where we've giving, and together with our group here are working on a similar thing, identity to be used in the finance sector. We have a proposal in our sandbox to roll it out, and together with working with ADB on this particular project. And I think and likewise, my other colleagues here might have done the same thing. That's the only thing that is constraining the enhancement in this area. Like the risk there in terms of potential, money laundering and all that. But look, it's a risk we will face, and there is laws or guidelines in place already to counter those areas. But I think the main important factor is to enhance the quality and the fastness of services that the financial sector is giving to the public. We are also faced with, I think, a few other new opportunities given this the impact of the pandemic, and I think it comes back to the way in terms of our regulatory functions. Those are the kind of challenges we face, and I think it's going forward. We'll have to look at other ways, more convenient ways of, you can maintain stability in the finance system, but enhancing or supporting growth at the same time. So those are kind of things that still it arose during this time, and I think it will be the feature. It will feature more prominently in the coming years. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Governor Farrell.
Yes, thank you. Not just a quick one, not to repeat what my other colleagues have already mentioned, but I think the pandemic has indeed engendered the need for more rapid increase in digitalization in the financial sector. I think from, this is my personal view, it appears that the pace of introducing new technology seems to be very faster than the pace of changing the legislations. In other words, legislations are too slow to change in accordance to the increasing changing technology. So perhaps if I can reiterate what Leah mentioned in his key note, I think the regulators really needs to understand the risks that are critical to identifying the risk in the digitalization, and they have to be able to come up with the relevant legislations. It would also seem to me that the regulators seem to be digitally illiterate in terms of going in tandem with the changing technology. So from a regulator's perspective, I think it's about time that we also do changes or make amendments to the existing legislations to become more modern. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Deputy Governor Alves Maria.
Thank you very much. Let me start with, I think, a very fruitful governor's view. I see, it's my personal opinion. I see in terms of the recent opportunities arising from the digitalization, as I see the opportunities of the increase and evolving digitalization is outweigh the risks. Both risks are there. We hear Governor said the risk, cybersecurity risk, etc. Governor Farrell just mentioned challenge of illiteracy. Most of the Pacific countries and perhaps a total 15% of the world still face the illiteracy, etc. But I see, my personal view, I see the digitalization outweighs the risk because it improves the efficiency of the financial services and particularly in payments, leaving people less interaction with the physical cash, which may also as one of the contributions to stop to minimize the spread of the virus through the physical money. So digitalization is support efficiency, and it get the more if we can get it will depend on the local context of each country, but if we can get to a point where more financial access points and the digital financial access points to the wider population, and if we are able to resolve to at least minimize the illiteracy, get more financial access points to the unbanked populations, it will also contribute to the unserved population and support the financial inclusion agenda at the global, regional, and local level. So it's my opinion that regulators, it is challenging, but Governor Ati, Governor Farrell just mentioned, and Governor Bakani just mentioned, we need to, the regulators seems like a bit slow in responding. So regulators need to adapt to the evolving digitalization of the financial services, but it need to take into account the local context. There is everybody knows it, there is no one size fits all. So the regulations and digitalizations need to take into account the local context. There are many cultural issues, many challenges in each country. So regulations need to adapt, but it need to take into account the local context. Thank you.
Great, thanks for those comments. Well said too. In the interest of time, we've got just under 10-15 minutes left, and maybe I'll just ask one more question, and it's question 6. It is the final question. It's the scene setting. How can the international community, your key stakeholders and others, be of help in addressing some of the intensified challenges in your respective economies? So that's the question I'll ask, and you've got a few minutes to sort of make your final remarks on that. So, Governor Ali, over to you.
Thank you. This morning, Fiji, we have a financial year ending in July. This morning, the government had a meeting with all the donor agencies, and the donors are represented by all the high commissioners or investors here. And I feel that given the sharp contraction we all had, and the impact on government deficit, tax revenue government deficit, and therefore the room for most Pacific Islanders to borrow in the international market is relatively small. We borrow in the domestic markets, or we borrow from some of these multilateral institutions like ADB and things. So hopefully what the international community can help us by, this is a time when they can either give us grants or help us secure some of this constrained loan with multilateral institutions. In a period, if we all start focusing on debt, and government is the only institution that can now stimulate the economy, and if we are unable, then the problem on poverty and income inequality will rise. So we all need to know that the rise in debt is temporary. We need to support how government can borrow in the interim, and the only way that we can do that is by borrowing from multilateral institutions at concessionary rates. So that to me is critical in this current environment. Otherwise, there'll be more poverty and more unemployment.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Ati, your final remarks, please.
No doubt the international community will continue to play important role in this pandemic. I think the responses of our key donors have been very critical, both in the bilateral and assistance to Vanuatu. I just have one particular concern. This pandemic is a global thing. I'm hearing that one of the main donors, bilateral donors, is cutting back on its aid to the rest of the world. I won't mention the name, but if that is true, the rest follows, we have a problem. Whom do we look up to on this particular front? I think that is very, very important. One very important donor is cutting back, scaling down on its planning to do that very soon. So what if the rest of those bilaterals follow the same? Where does that going to leave us or lead us? Thank you.
Thanks, Governor Athi. Governor Bakani.
More so, the international stakeholders play a very strong role in this strengthening both regulatory and policies within the economy. I think they, in the areas of particular areas of in the case of Papua New Guinea where the fiscal dominance prevailed, they've been upfront coming and supporting, including Australia government and of course the multilateral donor community. Now, I have and of course in the particular area of central bank in the Pacific also, particular areas that we've been dealing with in terms of corresponding banking relationships and all those kind of very particular to our and specific to our particular region. They are required to continue to support us in this area. I think going forward, we will, that relationship have to be continued to build to increase. We've seen increasing participation of those donor, especially private sector related in terms of equity holding in some of the little, banks or micro banks that we have. And this is quite encouraging. It gives a lot of confidence to those little entities, financial entities, and of course they, bring a lot of technology and also know-how, upskilling of the manpower. So those are kind of things that we're seeing changing in the economy. I think going forward, the commercial banking side is the where we face a lot of issues. It's a bit shallow here with the upcoming decision on the sale of Westpac to one of the local banks here. We're about to soon to make our decision on that particular one, but I think it changes the landscape, and that's where we been seeking some advice and all that from donors. But it's very, very clear that the absence of one bank will have a adverse impact on the rest of the financial sector in Papua New Guinea. So that's basically the kind of risk we face, the challenges we face going forward.
Thank you, Governor Bakani. Governor Farrell, your final comments?
Yeah, so, I mean, like my other colleagues, I must also acknowledge the support that's been rendered by our stakeholders. In particular, perhaps if there's further from Governor Ali's comments, perhaps in the area, now we are in the digital transformation, one of the areas that can be where support can also be sought from would be in the modernization of our existing legislations, so they can be relevant to the fast pace in technology. And finally, perhaps we need more of these regional interactions so we can learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Deputy Governor Alves Maria, your final word.
Thank you very much. I think with the distinguished governors, I think the community welcome the international communities and stakeholders support for the initiatives of the Pacific Islands country central banks and policymakers. Perhaps I would in different country have a different approach, but I would if you like, I would suppose that the support need to making the robust and modern financial services, products, innovatives, and efficiently to serve our public, leading to the financial inclusion and support economic developments and growth. But I would still make a note that it need to take the supports need to take into the local context where some initiatives may already exist. That's my final words. Thank you.
Right, thank you, governors. That is the panel session, and a huge wealth of reflections and great insight in the comments from governors. If I was to quickly try and summarize sort of the main themes on the outlook, I got a sense of, you know, the recovery that people thought they were going to see this year hasn't really panned out. If anything, it's been disappointing in terms of the degree of bounce back, principally owing to, you know, the borders remaining closed and perhaps reflecting, you know, the disproportionate impact that the Australian and New Zealand economies, the impact of border closure on, you know, the largest trading partners ostensibly for the Pacific Islands. And so given tourism, remittances are a big part, the ongoing impact of our respective border closures and the two big trading partners in the regions is having a huge impact there. On the banking sector, I guess it's the challenge that all jurisdictions are facing around this digital transformation, and the Pacific's no different, about the pace of transformation, how regulation catches up, but also the opportunities that it has, particularly around financial inclusion, lowering the costs and improving financial efficiency. Those are some of the opportunities that are present and may have a disproportionate impact in the Pacific area. And I guess the last comments I heard was basically the ongoing need for strong relationships with multilateral partners and international agencies. These are the most vulnerable nations, exposed to, you know, huge external shocks, COVID, cyclones, weather-related, all these things just sort of come home, you know, just bring home to, you know, to roost that these are vulnerable nations, and despite their best efforts, some things are out of their control, and the more support, ongoing support from multilateral agencies, the better. So with that, I will close the panel. I will thank all the governors hugely for their time and for their wisdom, and I will sign off and pass you back to the organisers. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you once again to our moderator, Mr. Yongha of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, for looking after the panel discussions for us during this forum. Thank you so much. We have now come to the last part of the program, and this will be the closing remarks from the Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs at Aotearoa, New Zealand, Honourable Nanaia Mahuta. Now, this will be a recording, so let us now listen to what the Honourable Minister has to say for us in her closing remarks. Thank you.
Koutou. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā karangatanga maha tēnā koutou. Thank you for inviting me to close this year's South Pacific Central Bank's Virtual Governors Forum. I'd like to speak to my approach to New Zealand's engagement in the Pacific, because this frames how economic challenges and remittance flows affect the pathway to resilience that we seek. Before doing so, can I please acknowledge Griffith University, the conveners of this forum, our Pacific whānau, Central Bank governors here today from Fiji, Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands and Timor-Leste, the Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. I recognise Australia, our trans-Tasman neighbour, and I acknowledge the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. As partners in the region, we work constructively together. We also have the ability collectively to try to effect change where the current context or practices harm our region and our communities. While encouraged by many of the positive developments under discussion on remittance flows, I continue to be concerned about the negative impacts of remittance transaction costs. In Aotearoa New Zealand, we're proud of the contribution that Pacific diaspora communities make to New Zealand's economy and well-being. Many hard-working families also have obligations to regional whānau. So, the costs and impacts of remittance flows have a direct impact for us, as well as taking a toll on the wider region. I'd like to lay down a challenge to all of us participating in this forum to increase our collaboration to support Pacific-led solutions and innovations. I applaud the work that you are doing. We all want to achieve regional prosperity and resilience, and I know we can do better. So I'd like to make some general remarks on New Zealand's Pacific engagement. New Zealand's home and heart is in the Pacific. Our engagement within the region is steered by our desire for a peaceful, stable, prosperous and resilient Pacific. We aim to operate as a true partner, collaborating with others in the shared stewardship of our blue ocean continent, Te Moana Nui Ākiwa. We're deeply committed to supporting the Pacific to uphold the Sustainable Development Goals. They provide an opportunity to improve the lives of our peoples and our planet. Economic resilience has a crucial role to play in our region, alongside social inclusion, well-being and stability. The banking sector is an important actor in the long-term resilience we seek, and we know directly from our partners that labour mobility and remittances are key pathways to resilience. As you've discussed today, the economic and fiscal impacts upon our region and our vulnerable communities continue to be devastating. Although it is positive to see the economic growth is forecast for this year, we know that many of our Pacific whānau face a long road to recovery. New Zealand is committed to supporting our Pacific whānau through the challenges COVID-19 is placing on our region. Our current priority is working with the most affected Pacific governments on their immediate needs. This makes sense for now. My overarching approach for New Zealand's development spending is, however, guided by the expected impact of our development assistance will have for longer-term resilience. Our immediate emergency economic support to Pacific countries, households and businesses includes $182 million in grants to date. The rollout of vaccines will also be important for social and economic recovery. I was pleased to announce last month that Aotearoa will be providing protection against COVID-19 to over 1.2 million people in the Pacific this year. But vaccines are not a silver bullet, and we're turning our focus from response and recovery to longer run resilience. While COVID-19 has amplified regional vulnerabilities, we need to be mindful that climate change remains the single greatest threat to Pacific lives and livelihoods. Climate change is an existential threat to our region. The importance of regionalism and our continued efforts to speak and work together have never been so vital. Forums such as this provide opportunities to come together as a region, to discuss shared challenges that require collective solutions. Only together can we find these solutions. Our relationship to the Pacific is special, as we recognise each country's inherent mana and their sovereign aspiration to achieve sustainable development so all people can prosper and live peacefully. We will engage more deliberately with Pacific communities both in New Zealand and the wider region to ensure that they're connected and contribute to projects that affect them. Each Pacific country has a different starting point for its own sustainable development journey. Each country determines its own development goals, its own needs, and its own actions. As partners, we will work together towards shared strategic objectives that create intergenerational impact and build positive change. A key part of supporting resilience, economic but also social, cultural and intergenerational, is increasing remittance flows and decreasing their transaction costs. While it is reassuring that Pacific remittances as a key prosperity driver and a significant share of GDP in many countries have been more resilient to COVID-19 than initially expected, we know that a drop is still predicted. Remittances have a huge impact on families and communities, both those receiving the funds and those working hard overseas to earn money to be sent home. We see this through examples like an alumni fundraiser that raised 5 million paanga for Tonga High School's library and hall. And the workers who invested around 8 million vatu of their money earned here in New Zealand to fund a new doctor's house at Waimali. So more now than ever, we must work to maintain and grow these flows. We know that Pacific remittances can be grown in a number of ways. Aotearoa New Zealand has enabled remittance flows to continue via the recognised Seasonal Employer or RSE scheme, which makes a direct contribution to the economic resilience of participating households and supports improvements in living standards. Money earned through the seasonal work is now factored into the lives of many whānau. It is relied on to pay for everyday living costs, housing and maintaining land and plantations. It also pays for schooling, meaning more young people attending secondary and tertiary education. We were pleased to welcome back an additional 2,000 Pacific RSE workers earlier this year. Another 2,400 workers will return over the next 9 months. We're also continuing to work on a review of the RSE policy. One of the review's goals is to embed an increased share of returns for participants. We want to ensure the policy strikes the right balance of delivering benefits to both employers and employees. Aotearoa New Zealand has also committed through the Regional PACER Plus trade agreement to exploring new labour mobility opportunities for Pacific people. This will be a critical part of building greater economic resilience at a community level. Although I acknowledge that in these challenging times we are initially focused on maintaining current opportunities where possible. To fully realise the benefits of our labour mobility schemes, we must continue to work together for more secure and cost-effective remittances. Targeting the different drivers of high transaction costs will ensure that more of what remitters send is reaching their whānau and communities. The Pacific Remittances Project with the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is an exciting initiative. It has the potential to make a genuine difference to addressing the high costs and challenges of complying with anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism regulations in the Pacific. The project is exploring the change we can make here in New Zealand, political, legislative, regulatory, to help Pacific financial service providers meet their compliance obligations and provide a more stable commercial environment. The team is also hard at work to scoping and designing a world-leading Know Your Customer service. This will help to build more efficient and cost-effective digital customer due diligence processes, providing the Pacific with modern tools to improve regulations aimed at anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. It is critical that we build Pacific capacity to better address these issues and meet international standards. These standards are key for combating illicit financial flows, and we must work together to build capability and confidence in implementing these standards. I'm really encouraged to see 9 South Pacific countries, Australia, Fiji, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Timor-Leste, Tonga and Vanuatu partnering together through their central banks to progress this regional Know Your Customer service. We're proud to directly contribute to this initiative. We must also be bold, creative and in touch with the evolving technology on offer. New Zealand supports the International Finance Corporation's Pacific Partnership, and through this initiative, innovative remittance products like Ave Paanga Pau, which is expanding access to remittance services in the Tonga-New Zealand corridor. The partnership's support for domestic payment system upgrades is another key piece of the picture. Remitting is personal, not transactional. It is shaped by a variety of factors, not simply what is cheapest. A service that costs more may still be chosen if it offers a faster transfer, or if a remitter has more trust in a certain provider. We know that many people still prefer to remit in person rather than digitally, although travel restrictions because of COVID-19 have by necessity prompted an increase in using digital remittance tools. We must ensure we are adapting to what users are telling us, and I'm excited to note that the sendmoneypacific.org website will shortly go live, newly redesigned to provide more information reflecting remitters' interests. We need to also continue to raise awareness of Pacific remittance flows' vulnerability to COVID-19. I support the work of the governments, organisations and civil society who have joined the call to action Remittances in Crisis and encourage the call to continue advocating for the Pacific. I know that many attendees are working closely with Aotearoa in these regional efforts, and I thank you for it. We know that stronger, more sustainable outcomes are realised through discussion, shared understanding and taking account of a range of diverse perspectives. I encourage you to continue to gather in forums such as this to discuss and to strengthen these critical connections. They are essential to supporting Pacific-owned solutions and innovations to meet the region's most complex challenges. Together, we can keep doing the good work to maximise our collective efforts and avoid duplication of initiatives in this space. Economic and financial inclusion are crucial to building long-term resilience. You, the decision makers, are making a difference for our people and our Pacific community. I commend you all for your hard work towards our shared goals of low-cost money transfers, economic and financial inclusion and long-term regional resilience. Thank you for this opportunity to join you all here today. I look forward to the time when I can visit your countries again in the near future. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Yes, once again, a big thank you now to the Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs at Aotearoa, New Zealand, Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, for the closing remarks for our forum this morning. Once again, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all our participants and speakers throughout this forum, and also a special thank you to our distinguished panelists for your time during this panel discussion with our moderator, Mr. Young. Ladies and gentlemen, a big thank you to also acknowledging the team at Griffith University, Dr. Parmendra Sharma and his team, and also to all of us that are joining online in your various institutions around the region. We have now come to the end of this forum. We hope to see you again in next year's forum for this same program with our Griffith University as well. Thank you one and all, and target to us from all of us here at Honiara, including the Governor, Dr. Luke Farrell at CBSI. We all have a wonderful day today and the rest of the week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uriel and everybody else. Can we, the panelists all, can we stay for one more minute, please? We would like to take some more pictures. And if you could just unmute your mics so that we don't see that red sign symbol there. Thank you.
Sunny. You don't have your glasses on.
I think that should be fine. I think they've taken some photos. Thank you very much, everybody. The governors really appreciate your presence and your time. Leah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We hope to see everybody, if not earlier, then about this time next year in the same forum.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. And it was a pleasure to meet you all virtually.
Yeah.
All the best. Thank you. Hopefully face-to-face soon.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.